As the new century continued to roll along, more and more Italians arrived in American ports, causing the ghettos of Manhattan and Brooklyn to burst at the seams. In keeping with the times, the Morello mob, as they were now commonly known, grew in size as well. Only full-blooded Sicilians were allowed in this new brotherhood, and only the toughest of those would make the cut. The gang now ran several different crews, with Morello's younger brother Niccolo, Ignazio Lupo, and Giuseppe Di Primo as captains. Lupo was also the de facto second-in-command and was consulted by Morello on all decisions. Morello decided to get the counterfeiting press operation moving again in New York City. He set up a huge new operation using a press in a local Manhattan apartment and began producing small denominations of false American and Canadian bills. This lasted until a young Irish girl named Molly Callahan, in a moment of curiosity, happened upon the press. In the apartment, there was a bedroom which Molly was told she must absolutely not enter. While working, she caught glimpses of the room and knew there was a printing press in there. On Christmas Day, her curiosity overrode her good sense, and believing the room empty, she snuck in. As she was closing the door upon entering, she turned, only to find Tommaso the Ox Petto staring right at her. He caught her as she tried to run, pinning her against the wall and throttling her like he had so many others. Afterward, they put her in a barrel and dumped her in the East River. After the Molly Callahan debacle, the press was moved to a farm in Highland, New York, across the Hudson River from Poughkeepsie. With so many new bills being printed, Morello now had his counterfeiters pushing bills from New York City to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Morello capo Giuseppe Di Primo recruited a crew of men to push fake bills throughout the tri-state area. It wasn't long before these bills started showing up heavily in area banks. This got the attention of the Secret Service, who decided that something needed to be done. So when the Secret Service showed up in New York in force, the department pointed them in the direction of one Sergeant, Joe Petrosino. He met the young Secret Service agent in charge at a local cafe just down the street from the station. The wily old street veteran had to laugh a bit at the young business type that walked in and sat across from him. "William Flynn, Secret Service. It's a pleasure to meet you," the young man said as he sat. "What are you hoping to accomplish here, Agent Flynn?" Petrosino said dryly. Mildly perturbed by the comment, Flynn stuttered. "To stop the flow of counterfeit currency into the economy and to imprison these counterfeiters. The problem is easy enough to—" "You cannot gather the evidence you need in this case using the methods common in policing today," Petrosino interrupted. "I hardly think you can diagnose," a flustered Flynn began before he was interrupted again. "You are not dealing with regular criminals here. This is a group of criminals called the Mafia from back in the old country. The Mafia protects itself through a strict code of silence called Omerta. This code has been bred into them from birth, and it gets worse. Omerta is practiced not just by the criminals, but the entire Italian community, eliminating any cooperation with law enforcement. They are forbidden to discuss not only criminal activities, but are also forbidden to reveal any information about the gang whatsoever, including its very existence," Petrosino exclaimed. "This wall of secrecy that shields these mafiosos, this strict code they adhere to, is also strictly enforced, and there are severe consequences for anyone who breaks it. It can mean a death sentence." Flynn, having been left speechless by the older Italian detective, fidgets and tugs at his tie. There's nothing that suggests a high level of organization. These bills," Flynn begins to stammer. As if on cue, Petrosino interjects again. "Are you serious about bringing these thugs to justice, Agent Flynn?" Irritated, but perhaps ready to listen for the first time, Agent Flynn answers the question. "All right, Sergeant. I'm ready when you are." And for the first time in a while, Petrosino cracked a genuine smile. After breakfast was finished, the two sat silently for a moment before Petrosino spoke again. "Let's take a walk," Petrosino said while getting up from the table. As the two strolled down the street, Petrosino began to pontificate. "The local mafia clan is from Corleone, Sicily. The The leader of this clan is a criminal that goes by the name of Giuseppe Morello. His chief enforcer and right-hand man is a notorious murderer by the name of Lupo the Wolf. These men are insulated, not only by the men that work for them, but also the community that they live in. This is the problem we must overcome. As they continued to walk through the city, Petrosino filled Flynn in on everything he knew. Meanwhile, the Morello clan continued to prosper. Those at the head of the clan were now all rich men. Whenever there was a problem, Morello would send his top enforcer, Tommaso the Ox Petto, or his right hand, Ignacio Lupo, to handle the situation. Crossing the Morellos was not an option. Those who did ended up in barrels or tossed overboard in the East River. Top counterfeiter Giuseppe DePrimo and his crew were now pushing fake bills created at their secret upstate press all over New England and the tri-state area. With law enforcement now on the lookout for counterfeit bills, it was only a matter of time before someone went down. Word soon hit the streets that 3 of Morello's counterfeit pushers in Pittsburgh had been arrested. Upon hearing the news, Morello headed over to discuss the new developments with his partner and underboss, Ignacio Lupo. "What are we going to do to solve our problem in Pittsburgh?" Morello said. Enough about that. "Have you heard what this fool Gallucci is doing?" Lupo complained, referring to the blackhand, extortionist turned powerful businessman, Giosuè Gallucci. Gallucci had shunned the secretive ways of La Cosa Nostra, and his public profile rode in the face of Omertà. "The way he runs his operation in the open, always in public, it's a disgrace to our way of life, and it goes against Omertà," he finished with a grunt. "This is not our concern, Ignacio," Morello said with exasperation. It was often that Morello had to help Lupo reorganize his priorities, as the man often had a mind for irrelevancy. "There is enough water in the well for everyone to use. Besides, he's a paisan. There's no percentage in creating unnecessary enemies," Morello finished. "What about the Camorra in Brooklyn?" Lupo asked. "There is a second well that I can draw the water from," Lupo opined. Morello shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The Camorra were a powerful confederation of Neapolitan gangs that controlled Brooklyn, and he knew Lupo had been chomping at the bit to move into their territory. Of course he was. Ignacio feared no one. However, Morello knew that the Camorra bosses, Pellegrino Moreno and Alejandro Valero, were not men to be trifled with. Their crews were some of the most violent in the city, and they would slit your throat with a hymn from church on their lips. Morello did not like to disagree with Lupo when he was in a foul mood, though, and responded diplomatically. "Let's watch them carefully, and when the time is right, we will move. Patience, my friend, patience," Morello counseled. The two finished their conversation and their drinks and parted ways. The Secret Service continued to apply pressure on the Morello counterfeiting operation. Their top counterfeiter upstate, Giuseppe DePrimo, was arrested, along with men from his crew by Agent Flynn and members of the Secret Service. Knowing that bribing the prosecutor and the judge were the only options, DePrimo's right hand, Benedetto Madonia, gathered $1,000 from his crew and family members to take to boss Giuseppe Morello in hopes of getting DePrimo released. A day later, Agent Flynn and Sergeant Petrosino positioned themselves on a rooftop across from the saloon on Prince Street and observed the comings and goings. Along with the usual suspects was a recently released Vito Cassioferro from Sicily. Later in the evening, a man they did not recognize walked in as well. This perked their interest. Outsiders were not permitted entrance, and this man looked important. Though they did not recognize the man, they notated his description in their daily report. Madonia walked into the saloon and headed over to the table where Giuseppe Morello sat with his younger brother Niccolo. Immediately stopped by Petto, Madonia blurted out, "Don Morello, I must speak with you. My brother Giuseppe has been arrested." Morello motioned for Petto to let the man pass, but before he could continue, Morello raised his hand to silence the man and then motioned for him to sit. After a moment of silence, Morello spoke. "Your brother-in-law's foolishness has cost me a lot of money already, and bribing judges is even more costly. So bring me $1,200, and we will see him released." But we only have 1,000, Don Morello, Madonia said in despair. Give me the money, and we will see what we can do, Morello said with finality, and with that, the meeting was over. Months go by, and the clan's rackets continued to grow. Family soldier Vito De Luca was released on counterfeiting charges and was now assisting Niccolo Terranova in running the mob's counterfeiting scheme. Lupo killed a business rival who refused his offer of protection, and the money kept rolling in. Finally, the trial of Giuseppe De Primo would come and go. He was convicted and sentenced to the maximum. When Benedetto Madonia heard the verdict, he flew into a rage. They stole from us. Where is the honor in this thing of ours? He rambled angrily. In the midst of this rage, he sent this message. Don Morello, the betrayal you have perpetrated on my heart and family is unforgivable. I demand the return of my $1,000 so we might hire a lawyer to appeal. Signed, B.M. Morello admitted to himself that he had dropped the ball on De Primo. Still, the utter lack of respect in the message drew Morello's ire. He decided to set up a meeting with Madonia under the pretense of getting his money back at a small restaurant in Little Italy. However, he thought, he'd send Petto and the wolf in his place. Waiting for the boss, Madonia dug into a plate of spaghetti and marinara. As he ate, he got angrier and angrier. Who were they to take his money and his brother-in-law's freedom? In his anger, he never noticed the waiter slipping away to lock the front door of the restaurant, nor the two men who slipped quietly from the kitchen. Ignazio Lupo and Tommaso Petto walked in and confronted Madonia at his table. Before Madonia could utter a word, the ox pulled Benedetto out of his seat and pinned him against the wall. He was then dragged by his hair to a rusty sink where Lupo thrust a stiletto deep into his neck. Lupo pulled his head back and with the same stiletto sliced deep, all but decapitating the man. Madonia quickly bled out into the sink before a large sugar barrel was wheeled in, lined with sawdust from the restaurant floor, and finally, the body was stuffed in and sealed. The next morning, a woman named Frances Connor saw a suspicious barrel at East 11th Street on her way to work. Looking inside, she was horrified to find a corpse. "Oh, my lord!" she screamed as she ran for help. Police withdrew the body and discovered it had been nearly decapitated by a deep knife wound across the throat. When Agent Flynn and Detective Petrosino arrived at the scene, they were both able to identify the victim as the stranger they had seen in Morello's company weeks prior. "That's the guy in Morello's saloon," Flynn exclaimed in excitement. "Before we move on the Morellos, we must identify this mystery man," Petrosino added solemnly. "Let me try one of my sources to see if we can't put a name to this face," he added quickly as he and Flynn stared at the corpse. That night, Petrosino found himself at the same Irish bar waiting for his inside man on Prince Street. When his source arrived, Petrosino wasted no time. "The man they found in the harbor, what's his name?" Petrosino blurted out as soon as the man sat at the table. "Hey, a little jumpy, are we, detect?" But that was as far as the man got before he was interrupted mid-sentence by Petrosino, who shot both arms out and grabbed the smaller man by the throat. "You listen to me. I want a name. Otherwise, the robbery charges you're under will be a small concern because I will bury you right next to this guy if you do not give me a name." The bar, which had fallen silent at the outburst, slowly began to normalize as Petrosino's source found his voice again. "Take it easy, jeez," the man said, now bullshit with fear. "I don't know the guy's name, but he's one of Joe De Primo's guys. Word is De Primo ain't happy he didn't get any help from the boss." Petrosino squeezed harder. "Which boss?" The man, now on the verge of passing out, wheezed, "Morello! Morello!" Petrosino, finally satisfied, let the man crumble to the floor. 60 seconds later, he was walking back towards his tenement. 2 days later, Petrosino arrived at Sing Sing prison with an appointment to visit inmate Giuseppe De Primo, a reputed high-level member of the Morello mob. Petrosino approached the table where De Primo sat. As he found his own chair, De Primo spoke. You're wasting your time here, you disgrazia. I'm not interested in your deals. Without saying a word, Petrosino slid a photo of the previous week's homicide. DePrimo glanced down and stiffened. Yes, he agreed, taken aback despite himself. I know that man. Of course I do. He's my brother-in-law. For a moment, it looked like DePrimo would crack, but only for a moment. Help us lock the scum who did this to your family in jail, Petrosino argued. DePrimo, though, had finally had enough. My brother-in-law is dead. My family, they're still alive, though, he said as he rose from the table. Guard! DePrimo yelled, and as if from thin air, a prison guard appeared and whisked him away. The next day, Petrosino met with Flynn along with others from NYPD and gave up the identity of the victim. Benedetto Madogna, brother-in-law Morello Capo Giuseppe DePrimo. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence here, but I don't know if we have enough, Petrosino concluded. It may not matter, Flynn countered. Inspector McCluskey is now in charge of the investigation. Petrosino was dumbfounded when he heard this. McCluskey was arrogant and headline crazy, and his ambition far outweighed his skill as a detective. Then, as if on cue, McCluskey entered the room. Petrosino, you have the man identified yet? McCluskey said with authority. Petrosino looked like his head was about to explode, but to his credit, he managed. Benedetto Madogna, Inspector. Okay then, he thundered. Let's go. When McCluskey, Flynn, and Petrosino arrived at 8 Prince Street, flanked by nearly 24 NYPD officers and Secret Service agents, most of the gang was caught unaware and collected easily as they attempted to run, including Tommaso Petto, who was too big to get far. The police later arrested Morello as he was walking along the Bowery. Lupo was arrested at his house, where a large amount of correspondence was taken as evidence. Vito La Duca, discharged for lack of evidence in the recent Pittsburgh counterfeiting case, was captured in a tenement opposite the Stanton Street butcher shop. More than a dozen arrests were made, but Vito Cascioferro, who was observed at the saloon at the same time as the newly identified Benedetto Madogna, could not be located in the city. In separate interrogation rooms, one by one, McCluskey and his men went at each of the mafiosos, and one by one, each refused to talk. However, Flynn and Petrosino did have a little evidence to hang their hat on. The victim had a missing pocket watch. Flynn and Petrosino suspected that Madogna had taken his son's tin watch with him to see Morello, and it was taken off of him during the murder. The detectives were then able to locate the watch using a pawn ticket found in Tommaso the Ox Petto's possession. Also, a letter linking Madogna to Morello was found discussing the return of $1,000 for DePrimo's appeal. Most correspondence was written in impenetrable Sicilian, and there was no sign of any contraband. No forged notes, no bad coins, no printing presses, nor anything to link the barrel victim directly to the Morello men. While there was some circumstantial evidence against both Morello and Petto, justice system corruption and the disappearance of witnesses slowed the prosecution. Crimes where Sicilians were involved were never solved. It didn't matter if the Sicilian in question was the victim or the belligerent. So it was that after a few days in jail and with no evidence except the watch and a letter, the entire gang save Thomas Petto was released from jail. 1 month later, the prosecution collapsed and Tommaso Petto was released as well. With no evidence connecting the mobsters to the counterfeiting either, it looked like the Morello mob was in the clear. Upon Petto's release, a huge party was thrown down on Prince Street. The festive mood on the street was reminiscent of a holiday as local thugs and peasants alike drank and cheered. Meanwhile, Flynn and Petrosino watched on. These two men were about to turn the pressure up on the mob. Things were about to hit a tipping point.